Welcome to Heart of the West, where every mark tells a tale. Adam Langford emerged from the train car with the measured grace of someone whose size demanded deliberate movement. A wooden crate rested against one shoulder, hemp rope coiled over the other. White dust covered his dark coat, frost rimmed his broad hat. His beard concealed the rigid set of a jaw hardened by decades of splitting timber and swallowing sorrow whole. The townsfolk paid him little notice as he passed exactly as Adam wanted it. He offered no words, no acknowledgement, simply moved like winter itself sliding down metal roofing, silent and inevitable, but he halted at the station platform's corner. There, huddled against the supply boxes, hidden where depot shadows met frozen earth, lay a woman, a Comanche woman. Her chin touched her chest, thick black hair matted with ice and dried blood. No coat protected her, only a wool shawl that had frozen rigid across her shoulders. Her torn leggings exposed wounded flesh at the knee. One hand pressed against her thigh where crimson had turned to black. The other lay flat in the snow, trembling fingers betraying cold or agony, perhaps both. She kept her gaze down, for now, from the station entrance, Griggs the railman hawked and spat. Been there since yesterday evening, word as she stumbled down from the hills. Likely took something, got herself chased off. Not our concern. Adam remained silent, lowering his crate with careful precision. You don't want trouble with her kind, Griggs pressed, voice cutting. She's got nobody, and our people fear what they can't understand. Adam dropped to one knee beside her. The woman stirred, ice-dusted lashes fluttering, one eye open, dark, keen, cautious. She didn't cringe or plead, merely studied him like someone measuring their final thread of dignity against their first glimpse of mercy. He pulled off his glove, touched her cheek cold as stream stones. Her lips bore cracks, blood had crystallized mid-flow. Then he lifted her. Not tenderly, not harshly, but with the certainty of someone whose mind was made. Griggs lurched forward, panic creeping into his voice. Now wait, Adam, you don't know her story. The sheriff needs to. Adam turned, the woman limp in his arms. Griggs faltered, I'm saying, you don't know who she is. Adam met his eyes with a look that silenced even the winter wind. She's someone who won't die today, he said, and walked into the storm. The station disappeared behind them, wind howled, fiercer, but Adam pressed on without pause. Not when his boots sank deep, not when the woman stirred and whispered something in Comanche too faint to catch. His horse waited where he'd secured it by the tree line. He settled her sideways in the saddle, wrapped in his own coat, and walked alongside. The forest loomed dark around them, towering trees like silent witnesses. Ravens followed overhead, black silhouettes against the pale sky. When they reached the cabin, she was semi-conscious once more. He carried her inside, laying her on the bed where his wife had once died, coughing crimson into white linens. That memory clawed at his ribs, but he pushed it aside. The fire was already burning. He brought water from the snowmold barrel and heated it. Her wound was inflamed, swollen. He peeled back the fabric 2 inches above her knee. The flesh had torn jagged, likely from tumbling onto sharp stone. No infection yet, but that would change without action. She winced but didn't cry out when he cleaned it, just clenched her teeth and stared at the ceiling like it had betrayed her. He stitched the wound with the same thread he used for leather work, not delicate, but it held. When finished, he placed water, biscuits, and a rabbit fur blanket within her reach. Then he took the chair by the hearth, back to her, watching the flames. They didn't speak that day or the next. Sometimes she woke and studied him as if trying to decode what manner of man he was. Other times she slept, restless and feverish. Snow pressed against the cabin walls, wolves sang in the darkness. Adam tended the fire and cooked what little he had: salt pork, beans, boiled roots. He moved through the house as he always had, measured, methodical, a man built for endurance. On the third morning, she sat up. You should have left me there, she said, voice rough as dried corn husks. Adam turned. His eyes were the color of wood smoke. Didn't feel right? She studied him for a long moment, then drank the water he'd left beside her, slow, controlled, showing no weakness. Name's Nieli, she muttered. Adam nodded once. Adam. Another silence stretched between them. I'm not here to harm you, she sighed, watching him carefully. I know you think I'm a thief, A liar. Maybe cursed. Adam leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The fire popped. No one ends up alone in the snow unless they've been cursed or betrayed. You don't seem cursed to me. She looked away. That night, she rose to relieve herself. He helped her to the door, then turned away. When she returned, he offered his arm again. She accepted it this time. No words passed between them. Each day she moved more, cleaned her bowl after eating, used a twig to scratch marks in the wood beside the bed, maybe counting days, maybe remembering something. One evening, he found her humming soft and low, a melody he'd never heard before. It made him think of rivers flowing beneath ice. She caught him listening, and the tune stopped. My mother sang it when she tended wounds, she said. It made pain forget where it lived. Seemed to work, he replied. She smiled. Small but genuine. That night, as he stacked wood by the hearth, she asked, "Why live out here alone?" He didn't answer immediately, then said, "Loved someone once." She left without leaving. The silence held. No pity, just understanding. Later, Neely pulled the rabbit pelt closer. People only see what they want to fear, even if it's dying. Adam nodded. Snow doesn't cover everything, and that was how they began to understand each other. Not through grand confessions, but through the space between words. A glance held longer. A silence that felt safe instead of sharp. The next morning, Adam left early to cut firewood. When he returned, Sheriff Harris stood on his porch. The man looked at him, then toward the woman resting inside. "You're harboring a known outsider," the sheriff said. "We heard she came from a band accused of raiding cattle stations." Adam didn't reply. "She's not supposed to be here," Harris added, hand on his pistol. Adam stepped onto the porch, snow crunching underfoot. "She's not supposed to be dead either. Town's talking," Harris warned. "You'll answer for it if things go wrong." Adam opened the door. Let them talk. When the sheriff left, Neely stood at the threshold, blanket wrapped around her like armor. "I should leave," she said, "before they come with more than words." Adam stared into the woods. Thought of how snow covers prints, but not what made them. He looked back at her, voice low, "You're already home." And then he turned, went inside, and left the door open behind him. The cabin smelled of pine smoke, iron pans, and old sorrow. The kind of sorrow that lived in floorboards and curtains. In the empty space beside the dinner table, where no chair had been pulled out in years. Every board creaked like it remembered laughter, and couldn't find it anymore. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, time moved slower, like breath in a cold room. Adam moved through it the way he always had, deliberate, quiet, his boots heavy against the wood. He hung strips of venison over the hearth, stirred a pot of bitter root stew, sharpened a knife that hadn't drawn blood in years. He didn't speak, and neither did she, not much. Neely lay in the bed, propped against old pillows that still carried the faint scent of lavender and grief. Her leg was wrapped in linen. The swelling had receded, but the pain had settled deep. Still, she refused to cry out. She watched him move with the eyes of someone who'd learned not to trust kindness until it had lasted longer than a day. The storm didn't break for 4 more nights. In that time, they learned the shape of silence between them. It wasn't empty. It was thick with questions neither dared ask yet. Why had he helped her? Why hadn't she refused? Why did they feel less alone even when they weren't speaking? One evening, he placed a steaming tin cup beside her hand. Bone broth and crushed pepper root. She took it without thanks, but not ungratefully. She drank slowly, like each sip cost her a secret. "Pain's easing," she said finally. He nodded. "Still can't bend the leg, won't need to for a while." He turned back to the fire, but her voice followed him. "You ever lose something, Adam? So bad it stopped making sense why the sun still rose the next day." His breath caught just enough for her to notice. He didn't answer, but he added another log to the fire, and the flame flared like it wanted to speak for him. Later that night, she watched him from the bed as he ran his hand along the mantel's edge, pausing at a faded ribbon blue, sun-bleached, tied once by a hand that no longer touched anything in this world. "You keep ghosts close," she said. "I let them stay till they're ready to go." She didn't ask who the ribbon belonged to. She knew. Loss doesn't need introductions. By the 6th day, she could sit upright without wincing. The fever was gone. Her cheeks held color again, faint like the blush of dawn behind snow clouds. She'd started brushing her hair with an old bone comb she found in the drawer. Braided it in 3 strands, wrapped it in a strip of deer hide. Adam noticed but didn't say anything. That morning she tried to stand. He moved toward her on instinct, hands ready to catch, but she raised a palm. No, her legs shook. She gritted her teeth and stood just for a breath. Then her knee buckled. He caught her before she hit the floor, arms around her waist. She tapped his chest lightly. I said no. You're not a tree yet, he said. You'll need roots before you stand that long. She looked at him then, close enough to smell cedar smoke on his shirt, close enough to feel the steadiness in him. Not gentleness, not pity, just steadiness, like an oak that won't bend even in wind. He set her back on the bed, slower this time. She didn't fight it. The next few days, she moved more. She used a carved cane he gave her, one he'd made years ago and never used. Said it was a practice piece. She didn't believe him. She began limping around the cabin, fingers brushing bookshelves, worn tabletops, and the handle of the cast iron skillet. She cooked a little, nothing fancy. Boiled roots and cornbread. Her hands, though tired, were sure. Adam watched her settle into the rhythm of his space. The way she swept dust from the corners without being asked. How she lined the knives, in order of size. How she murmured to the fire when she fed it like it was a child that needed comforting. One evening, while he was splitting kindling out back, she opened the chest at the foot of the bed. Inside were folded shirts, clean linens, and a small journal. The leather cover was soft, well-handled. She opened it slowly. Inside, pressed flowers, each one labeled with a date and a name. The last one, Lilac, Eliza, 2 years ago. She closed the book gently and didn't put it back. She left it on the bedside table, a quiet offering. That night, after dinner, she asked, what did she love? Adam didn't pretend not to know who she meant. He stared into the fire, lips tight. Lilacs, he said, sunsets over the ridge. Ironing my shirts even when I didn't ask. Singing when it rained. You still hear her? He nodded once. I hear my mother when I braid my hair, she said. She taught me to never kneel unless I'm praying or tying someone's wound. He smiled at that, not with his mouth, but with the soft shift of breath that came from remembering something good. The cabin, once heavy with quiet, now began to hold a different silence. Not sorrow, not tension, but something waiting to be named. The first time she stepped outside again, the snow was shin-deep and crusted. She braced against the door frame, breath steaming, eyes narrowing against the brightness. The world looked washed in salt. Pines stood like sentinels. Ravens flew overhead, black stitches in the sky. He offered her his arm. She hesitated, then took it. They walked a few steps together, slow and uncertain. When she stumbled, he caught her. And this time, she didn't pull away. Feels different out here, she said. Colder, but cleaner. He looked out over the ridge. Cabins remember everything, but snow forgives. She laughed just once, soft as snow falling. Back inside, they sat near the fire again. Her braid had come undone and strands curled along her cheek. She didn't fix it. I'll be gone when spring comes, she said. Adam didn't answer, just leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You're not the only one with ghosts, she added. I didn't ask you to stay. She smiled at that, the kind that says I know. Later, when he stoked the fire and she dozed, a knock came at the door. 3 slow thuds. He rose, careful not to wake her. At the threshold stood Mrs. Habley, wrapped in wool and suspicion. Her eyes scanned the room behind him. Folks in town say you're housing an Indian woman. Adam didn't reply. I brought this, she said, holding up a jar of preserved peaches. Figured someone healing might need sweetness. He took the jar. She lingered. Just make sure the kindness doesn't blind you. They're not all meant to be saved. Before he could respond, she turned and walked into the dusk. He stood there a long moment, jar in hand, the cold trying to find its way into his bones. When he came back inside, Neely was sitting up, eyes on him. Should I be worried? She asked. No, he said, setting the jar down gently. But I think the town's watching now. She didn't flinch. Let them. Then quiet again. The fire settled into embers. Outside, the wind began to rise, slow and crawling. As he blew out the lantern, she asked. Adam, if someone gave you a second chance, would you take it? He didn't answer, but he didn't blow out the second lantern either. The snow began to thin in early March, but the cold hadn't left. It hung in the trees, clung to the wood pile, crept beneath the doors like something trying to remember its way home. The forest breathed quieter now, but the silence had changed. It was no longer empty, it was listening. Neely walked better each day. Her limp was soft now, barely more than a drag in her step. She moved without the cane, tested her balance on the porch, sometimes alone, sometimes with Adam near enough to catch her if the ice played cruel. She didn't always speak when she passed him, but she never avoided his gaze anymore. Something wordless passed between them. Something slow, something unspoken, but present, like a song only they could hear the last few notes of. One afternoon, as light streamed through the smoke-scratched window, she sat at the table cutting herbs she'd found under thawing bark, yellow root, some dried birch, sweet fern. The cabin smelled of smoke and something gently bitter. She worked with the care of someone who'd done this before, who knew how to coax healing from what others called weeds. Adam watched her from the doorway. He had a tool belt slung low on his hip and sawdust in his beard. He'd spent the morning mending the shed door, though it didn't really need mending. She didn't comment. What are those for? He asked finally. For pain, she said. And sleep, and remembering. He raised an eyebrow. She didn't explain. That evening, as they shared stew by the fire, she turned to him and asked, "Do you believe in omens?" He shrugged. "I believe in signs, but I don't always know how to read them." She smiled faintly. "The morning before I left my people, a raven landed on my tent pole, looked me straight in the eye, then flew west. You think it brought you here? I think it reminded me where pain begins." He stirred the stew without eating. "You never told me why they turned you out." Her fingers tightened around her spoon, then loosened. "I healed a settler's daughter," she said. "A fever. No one else would touch her. I broke our law by tending to her, saving her." She nodded. "But that's not how they saw it. They said I gave away sacred knowledge, that I betrayed the spirits. My own sister wouldn't look at me." Adam looked into the fire. "My wife died in this bed 2 years ago, sick lungs. I tried to carry her to town, but the road froze behind us. She didn't make it through the night. I'm sorry, I should have left sooner. I thought I had more time." She looked at him then, not with pity, but with that rare, aching understanding only those who've been cast out by fate can give. "I think time doesn't care what we thought," she whispered. Later that week, the sheriff came again. Adam was in the woods when he heard the hoof beats. He returned with his axe still in hand, bark dust still clinging to his coat. Sheriff Harris stood on the porch, arms crossed, boots heavy with the arrogance of men who never questioned their own authority. Behind him, 2 townsmen held rifles slung across their shoulders. "She's still here?" the sheriff asked. Adam didn't answer. "She's Comanche. That makes her a danger." Adam leaned his axe against the post. "She hasn't done a thing but survive. She doesn't belong." Adam's voice dropped low. "Neither do most folks who built cabins on stolen land." That earned a long silence. Harris shifted. "People talk. Adam, there's going to be pressure. Could be you lose more than reputation next time. I already lost what mattered. Then don't lose your life, too." Adam didn't threaten, just stood there until the men left, their horses kicking up slush. Inside, Neely had seen it all through the window. She didn't speak when he came in, just set the kettle to boil. He sat down at the table, tired down to the bone. "They're afraid," she said softly. "No, they always are." Another silence. Then, as the kettle hissed, she asked, "Why do you keep me here?" "You're not kept," he replied. "But why do you let me stay?" Adam looked at her, eyes shadowed by the firelight. "Because I know what it is to be called a threat when all you've done is breathe." She swallowed. The kettle screamed. She turned from it before it burned. That night, she told him another story of her grandmother who once healed a dying warrior with a song alone. How people said it was magic. How the same people buried her without a grave marker when her last breath was given to a white man's child. "Kindness gets punished when it crosses lines others drew in fear," she said. Adam didn't answer, but he stayed up late that night, sitting by the fire long after she had gone to sleep, watching the flames like they were speaking in a language he almost understood. In the morning, she found him outside stacking wood. "Teach me to use that," she said, pointing to the axe. He looked up. "Your leg, it's stronger now." He handed it to her without further protest. The handle was rough in her grip, but she held it firm. He showed her the motion: lift, drop, control. Her first swing nearly missed the log. He didn't laugh, just guided her wrists. "Don't fight the weight. Let it fall. You just direct it." The second swing landed cleaner. By noon, her palms were blistered, but she didn't stop until she'd split 3 logs. He didn't say it, but he was proud. She didn't say it, but she felt alive. Later, while washing in the stream behind the cabin, she caught her reflection in a shallow pool. Her face was no longer hollow, her eyes no longer braced for cruelty. There was strength there now. Not pride, something older, something earned. That evening, they sat outside together, watching the sun burn behind the trees. "Folk will come again," she said. "I know, they won't just talk next time." He nodded. "You don't have to choose me," she whispered. "I didn't," Adam said, staring at the light fading from the sky. "But I did choose not to walk away." They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they weren't ready to name. As darkness fell, she reached out, just a hand on his arm. Not affection, not promise, just presence, just warmth. And then quietly, she asked, "Do you believe ashes still remember the shape of fire?" He looked down at her fingers on his sleeve, at the place where her touch steadied him more than his boots ever could. "I think they do," he said. She didn't move her hand, and he didn't ask her to. But somewhere in the cabin behind them, the second lantern was already lit. The first torchlight appeared at dusk, small, flickering, carried by a rider moving too slow to be casual. It glowed like a warning through the thinning mist, amber against the blue hush of twilight. Adam saw it from the ridge where he was gathering fallen pine. He stopped, snow creaking beneath his boots, and listened. More followed. 5, maybe 6 riders, close enough now that the soft clop of hooves pressed into the silence like guilt too long buried. The kind of silence that hung before a sentence was passed. He let the axe fall beside the wood pile and turned back toward the cabin. His long stride swallowed by snow drifts and a quickening wind that smelled of smoke and judgment. Inside, Nieli stood near the hearth, stirring a pot of crushed berries and birch syrup. Her sleeves were rolled, a braid fell down her back like a black river. She didn't look up when the door opened, but she felt him. "They're coming," he said. She stilled. "Riders. 6 maybe, some with torches." She didn't ask who, she already knew. She turned from the fire, wiped her hands on a linen cloth, and moved to the window. Her breath clouded the glass. "Then it's time," she said. He moved to the cupboard and pulled out the shotgun, oiled, loaded only with rock salt and iron patience. He set it by the door, but didn't reach for it. She moved to stand beside him, no fear in her face, only that look she wore when her foot pressed into snow for the first time that season. Uncertain but unflinching. "They don't come to talk," she said. "No," Adam replied. "They come to confirm what they already believe." By the time the riders reached the porch, darkness had wrapped the forest in velvet shadow. Only the torches danced, weaving orange ghosts across the pines. Adam stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. The cold curled around his ankles, but he didn't flinch. Griggs was first to speak. "She's still here then?" Adam didn't answer. Sheriff Harris was next. He looked less certain than before. "The town's restless, Adam. You know how close the Comanche border runs. Folks are uneasy, they hear stories." Adam's voice was steady. "Then let them come speak to me, not carry fire into my yard like cowards." "She's one of them," someone muttered behind the sheriff. "How long before others come?" "She's a woman," Adam said. "She's wounded. She's healed more in this house than any of you ever bled for." A long silence. Then another voice, higher, unfamiliar. "My sister died in the raids last spring. My cousin, too." "What if she was one of them?" "She wasn't," Adam said. "She was already half dead in the snow when I found her. No tribe behind her, no weapons. Just a woman with no place to fall but here." Griggs dismounted, holding the torch higher. "We ain't here to hurt nobody. We're here for the town's peace." "You mean its comfort," Nieli said, stepping forward. Into the torchlight, her voice carried like wind over bone. Every man there froze. She stood with her braid down her chest, in Adam's coat, face unpainted, shoulders squared. I was cast out by my own. I've healed your kind and been hunted for it. And now you think my breath alone will summon war. Harris's eyes narrowed. We don't know what you carry. She took a step forward. Neither do I. Grief. Silence. Maybe that's enough to make men burn things they don't understand. Griggs moved toward the porch. We can't let you stay. Adam stepped between them, hands at his sides, but wide as tree trunks. His voice dropped. Then you'll have to take her. No one moved. A log cracked inside the cabin, sending sparks into the air. It sounded like gunfire. Then Mrs. Habley's voice rose from the back of the group. We brought food once. Not fire. Eyes turned. She walked forward. No torch, no weapon, just a wrapped bundle in her arms. She tended to my cousin last week, made her a tonic from herbs. The girl's fever broke the next morning. Griggs scowled. That doesn't change who she is. No, the old woman said, but it might change who we are. Harris shifted. The flame of his torch flickered uncertainly in his hand. We're not here to judge hearts, he said after a long pause. Just to keep order, then leave, Adam said. There's order here. The men looked among themselves, unsure. The fire in Griggs's torch hissed, and one by one they began to turn, slowly, not with apology, but with the uneasy quiet of those who realize they've come to a place where truth already lives. Within minutes, the clearing emptied. Adam stood there a while, his breath rising in columns of white. Then he turned, inside. Niele hadn't moved. She watched him close the door, watched him set the shotgun back against the wall like it had never been needed. They'll come again, she said softly. Maybe. She took a deep breath, then exhaled slow. I was ready to go, she whispered. If they tried. I know. He walked to the table, hands trembling only slightly as he set down the kettle. But you didn't ask me to. I would have stayed, she added. If you'd asked. He said nothing. Just nodded once. She stepped toward him, close now. Close enough that he could see the small scar above her left brow, the way her lashes curled slightly at the ends. You think this peace will last? She asked. I think, he said slowly, peace is something you choose again every morning. The cabin crackled with firelight. Shadows danced along the walls like memories uncoiling. She moved to sit beside him, not across from him, beside him, shoulder brushing shoulder. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. I was born in a tent where the wind never stopped crying, she said. My mother said a woman is not a place. She's the fire inside one. Adam looked down at their hands. Then maybe that's why this cabin still stands, he said. You brought it back its fire. She closed her eyes. Outside, the last torchlight faded into the woods, but neither of them moved. And somewhere beyond the pines, another flame began to rise. Not from anger, not from fear, but from the quiet heat of something finally kindled. The thaw came slow. Snow melted not in floods, but in trickles off the edge of the roof, along the seams of the window panes, down the lines of the old horse trough outside. Winter left like an old man, reluctant, bitter, but finally gone. And with it, the silence between Adam and Niele began to change. They spoke more now, not in full conversations, but in the kind of talk that stretched gently across small chores, passing salt, naming herbs, pointing to storm clouds, and wondering aloud if spring would hold. Each word between them seemed to soften a place neither had realized was still raw. One morning, Adam caught her humming again. She was planting onions near the side of the house, sleeves rolled, dirt beneath her fingernails. She didn't see him watching, and he didn't speak, only listened. The melody was the same one she had once whispered in fevered dreams. Now steadier, stronger, full. The garden had not existed a month ago. She'd asked for it one evening with nothing more than a nod toward a patch of thawed earth, and the words, "It wants something to grow." He had tilled it in silence. The next day, inside the cabin, signs of her had begun to settle in. Her pouch of dried roots beside the salt jar, her shawl on the hook next to his coat, her thin handwriting on the corner of the pantry door where she'd marked which herbs lasted longest. The second lantern, once symbolic, now burned most nights without question. Still, the space between them held its shape. Not distance, not reluctance, but waiting. Adam often woke before sunrise. He would watch her as she slept, her breath even, her brows smooth, the fire casting gold across her face. He never touched her. But each morning he left the same way with 2 cups warming on the stove when she stirred. On the 5th morning of true spring, he returned from checking the trap line and found the door open. She was gone. Not a note, not a trace, just the echo of a humming song and the garden untended. He stood there a long moment, boots unmoving, fingers slowly tightening around the burlap sack in his hand. Then he saddled the horse. She had taken nothing but her pouch, not even her coat. That worried him more than if she'd taken everything. He followed the trail into the hills. It was faint, almost hidden, but he knew her gait now. The slight tilt of her step, the way she leaned into wind. The pine needles told the story she hadn't spoken. Hours passed. He found her near the ridge line where the pines began to bow and the wind spoke in whistles instead of howls. She sat on a fallen log, knees drawn up, her braid undone and whipping in the breeze. She didn't turn when he approached. "I thought you might have gone west," he said. She shook her head. "I walked toward what I feared," she said. "That's not the same as running." He stepped off the horse, tied the reins to a crooked branch. "You left without telling me. I didn't know what to say. I would have listened." She looked up at him then. Her eyes were swollen from wind or tears. He couldn't tell. "I needed to remember who I was before they called me traitor," she said. "Before kindness cost me everything." He sat beside her, careful, his weight shifting the log. "I watched my wife die," he said softly, "and I sat in the cabin afterward every night, thinking if I'd prayed harder or ridden faster, maybe I wouldn't be alone." "You're not alone." He looked down at his hands, rough and cold. "That's the part that scares me." Her fingers brushed his. "Me, too." A hawk circled high above, letting out a low cry that vanished in the sky. "I'm not healed," she whispered. "Not all the way. Neither am I. I still wake up angry sometimes. So do I. And I don't know what comes next." Adam turned toward her, eyes tired but clear. "Maybe that's the good part." She smiled, small, worn, but real. They sat like that for a while, the silence no longer heavy, just shared. Then a rustling from the woods. A figure emerged, a young boy, no more than 12, running barefoot, clothes torn, eyes wide with terror. He stumbled, caught sight of Adam and Nieli, and froze. Adam rose, hands open. "You lost." The boy shook his head violently. "They're coming. I escaped. There's 5, maybe 6 men." "They took my sister," he said. The boy's voice broke. Nieli was already on her feet. "Where?" she asked. He pointed behind him. "Down the ridge. There's a wagon. They have rifles." Adam didn't hesitate. He loaded the shotgun with lead this time. They rode together, Nieli behind him, arms wrapped tight, the boy guiding from the saddle horn, voice shaking with urgency. The sun was slipping fast, carving gold between branches dotted the base of the ridge. They spotted the wagon. 3 men stood guard, one laughing near the canvas cover. A scream high, desperate tripped through the trees. Adam handed Nieli the reins and dismounted. "Stay here," he said. She didn't. They moved together. Adam stepped out first, weapon raised. "Let her go." One of the men turned, grin fading. "Ain't your business, big man. Make it mine." The man raised his rifle. Adam fired. The recoil slammed his shoulder, the shot echoing like thunder. The man dropped, screaming. The others scrambled. One ran. The third reached for the girl inside the wagon. Nieli moved before he could. She grabbed the rifle from